In Japanese philosophy, there exists a silent and brutal truth. Most battles are lost not by the enemy's strength, but by the chaos we carry within ourselves. And Miyamoto Musashi, the greatest swordsman in history, knew this better than anyone. This is the type of phrase that not only awakens curiosity, it forces you to keep listening. And if you've ever felt your mind freeze at the exact moment you needed it most, stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover can surprise you. Where the battle really begins. How many times have you walked away from a discussion feeling completely defeated? That tightness in your chest, that mix of shame, anger, and frustration that insists on lingering even hours later. Have you experienced this? The scene is always similar. You try to explain your point, try to defend your position, but the words don't come out. Your mind seems to go blank, as if someone had switched off your clarity. And while this happens, the other person speaks. Questions, pressures you, and you just watch control slip through your fingers. This moment hurts not just the ego, it hurts the identity, it hurts confidence, because deep down, the feeling that remains is not just that you lost a discussion, it's that you lost respect for yourself. It's feeling that even though you're intelligent, even though you have arguments, you're not capable of using them when it really matters, as if internal strength were missing, as if your presence weren't enough, as if something inside you were broken. And it's exactly here that the power of Japanese philosophy enters, the same philosophy that shaped warriors, strategists, monks, and leaders. The same philosophy that molded Miyamoto Musashi, known not only for his skill with the sword, but for his absolute mastery of the mind, a mastery so profound that many considered it almost supernatural. Musashi understood something that most people still haven't realized. True defeat never comes from outside. It's born within the mind itself. Have you ever stopped to think about this? What if the problem was never the other person? What if you don't lose discussions because you have weak arguments, but because you lose control of your internal state? This is a harsh truth, and this is why so many people avoid facing it. But when Musashi spoke about winning without effort, he wasn't talking about manipulating, humiliating, or destroying the other. He was speaking of something much deeper, more subtle, and more powerful: defeating yourself before the battle begins. This is the essence of mental strength. This is the root of inner discipline. Imagine for a moment how your life would change if, instead of freezing or exploding, you could remain firm, centered, serene, even in the middle of an intense discussion. Imagine the difference it would make if you could control your energy, your emotions, your thoughts, and respond with clarity, confidence, and presence. This isn't a superpower. It's not a gift reserved for a few. It's a trainable skill, it's a path, and Musashi left clear clues about how to walk that path. What we're going to explore today isn't just a psychological trick, but a way of seeing yourself that can completely redefine how you face conflicts, debates, and difficult conversations. And if you're here, it's because you feel it's already time to reclaim that inner power, the one you lost at some point, perhaps without noticing. Now, before we move forward, I want you to pay attention to one thing. Everything changes when you understand that the real discussion is never with the other person. It's with your own fear. And that's exactly why we need to go deeper. Because what comes next reveals why Musashi never froze at the decisive moment, and how you can also reach this level of control. Let's continue. And as you begin to understand this internal mechanism that Musashi mastered, you realize that true strength in a discussion never comes from aggressiveness, nor from having the perfect answer on the tip of your tongue. It comes from emotional control, from the ability to stay calm when the other expects you to collapse, from the skill to breathe when the other accelerates, from the firm presence that dismantles the attack without needing to raise your voice. And perhaps as you listen to this now, some part of you is recognizing exactly what's been missing from your discussions. It's not knowledge, it's internal state. And if this makes sense to you, if at some point during this content you thought this is what happens to me, then I want to make you a simple but powerful invitation. Write in the comments, "I maintain control," in any discussion. This phrase seals a commitment to yourself. It's not just a random comment, it's a living reminder that you're choosing to master your own mind before trying to master the conversation. This small act creates a mental anchor, And every time you revisit this phrase, even without realizing it, you'll remember what truly gives you strength in front of any person: self-control. Also, leave your like. I'm not saying this out of obligation, and you know it. I say it because if this knowledge has value to you, and if you believe more people deserve to learn to stay calm and win discussions without losing their dignity, then your like makes this really happen. It helps this content reach someone who, right now, is losing debates because they're losing internal control. You can be the bridge that delivers this message to them. And of course, subscribe to the channel, not to inflate numbers, but because you're entering a path. Here we talk about mental strength, emotional strategy, Japanese philosophy, and especially the type of wisdom that transforms not just how you discuss, but how you live. If you want to keep learning from Musashi, want to strengthen your mind, and want to master conversations with serenity and presence, then being subscribed is the natural next step in this journey. Your participation here helps this channel grow and reach more people who need these teachings. We're a community of people seeking clarity, strategy, and emotional strength. And each comment, each like, each subscription is a sign that you're here because you value this kind of transformation. Now that we've adjusted your internal presence, we can continue. Because understanding the problem is just the first stage, and what comes next reveals why emotional control is the invisible weapon that wins any discussion before it even starts. The truth that hurts. The problem isn't the other person. When we start to observe the backstage of our own reactions, something inevitable appears. Most people blame the other's temperament, the provocation, the injustice, the lack of arguments, but rarely look inward. It's more comfortable to believe that we lost a discussion because we were attacked, interrupted, or because the other was disloyal. But there's a hidden truth that Japanese philosophy has repeated for centuries, and Miyamoto Musashi knew it deeply. You don't lose discussions because of the other, but because of what happens inside your mind in the seconds before you respond. It's hard to admit, but this is where transformation begins. It's not lack of intelligence. It never was. It's lack of mental discipline. It's the internal breakdown that occurs when emotion takes control and hijacks your clarity. It's the rush to prove a point, the anxiety to seem right, the fear of seeming weak. And while all this mixes inside, your words lose power, not because you're incapable, but because your center falls apart. Musashi said that a warrior only enters a dispute when already defeated inside, and this applies to any debate, from a simple conversation to an intense discussion that demands firmness and presence. When you understand that the problem isn't external, something changes. Your mentality changes. You recover control of your decisions. You realize there's an invisible space between what you feel and what you do, and that's where true power lives. And the best part is that this isn't a gift. It's not something reserved for a few. It's trainable. Anyone can develop this inner strength, this strategic calm, this control that completely transforms the impact of your words. Musashi's psychological trick. When you dive into Japanese philosophy and carefully observe Miyamoto Musashi's journey, you discover a truth that dismantles practically everything we imagine about discussions and confrontations. Musashi never worried about defeating the other. He didn't invest his energy in proving anything, nor in seeming superior. His psychological trick was different, deeper, and more silent. He argued to defeat himself. It seems simple, but this shift in intention completely transforms the impact of any interaction. When your goal stops being to knock down the other and becomes maintaining inner control, everything changes. Your posture, your decisions, your mentality, and even how the environment reacts to you. Musashi observed before responding. He observed not the enemy, but himself. He observed the rhythm of his own breathing, the tension in his muscles, the flow of his thoughts. He knew that if he let an emotion take center stage, he'd lose clarity. And if he lost clarity, he'd lose control. That's why his presence was so disconcerting. He didn't move by impulse, but by awareness. While the other tried to attack, pressure, or provoke, Musashi was simply perceiving his own internal state. And when you do this, the discussion stops being a clash and becomes controlled territory. Whoever controls their own mind controls the entire field. This is the hidden truth that few people perceive. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding this trick is realizing that true power lies in the silent intention that precedes each word. From here on, the path begins to reveal nuances that change everything. Before moving forward, comment, I choose to master my internal state. The moment Musashi changed the game, there's a rarely discussed story in the backstage of Japanese philosophy, but one that precisely reveals the impact of Miyamoto Musashi's mentality. They say that before a verbal duel with an influential court lord, Musashi surprised everyone by remaining completely silent. The environment was charged, full of expectations, as if every movement could define the course of that tense conversation. Those present interpreted that silence as hesitation, perhaps even fear. But behind that quiet, something much larger was happening. Musashi wasn't analyzing the other. He was analyzing himself. He was perceiving every detail of his own body, every micro-tension, every emotion trying to emerge. He knew that any word spoken without internal mastery would become fragile. This moment reveals a hidden truth. While the other rushes to attack, true strength belongs to those who don't rush. When he finally decided to speak, Musashi said only a few words. Firm, direct, calm. There was no aggressiveness, no urgency. There was presence. And this presence, so rare and so powerful, made the entire room fall silent. It wasn't the content of the phrase that won the debate, but the energy behind it. He didn't win through rhetoric, he won because his mind was unshakable. This transforms everything, because it shows that discussions aren't decided by the amount of arguments, but by the emotional stability of who's there. And when you look at this scene, with maturity, you realize this is the true transformation, mastering your own state before trying to control the situation. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because understanding this story is seeing the exact point where mentality transforms into real presence and where internal decisions shape external results. Before we continue, comment, I speak when my mind is firm. Win before you speak. When you observe Japanese philosophy carefully, you perceive a deep pattern that runs through Miyamoto Musashi's teachings. True victory happens before the first word. Musashi understood that if the mind was taken by chaos, tension, or the need to prove something, any phrase would transform into a weapon against yourself. That's why so many lose discussions without realizing it. It's not the argument that fails, it's the internal state that collapses. And when that happens, the conversation stops being dialogue and becomes emotional survival. Musashi knew that the first enemy to be defeated is always your own instability. This vision changes everything because it reveals a hidden truth that almost no one considers. You don't win a discussion through the strength of what you say, but through the strength of who you are while saying it. It's the silent impact of your presence, the conviction born from self-control, the calm that dismantles attacks without you needing to raise your voice. While the other gets agitated, you remain firm. While the other tries to pressure, you remain lucid. Musashi trained this posture daily, and that's what transformed each of his words into something precise, almost cutting. He knew that convincing the other is a consequence, not the goal. The real goal is keeping your mind unshaken when everyone expects you to get lost. This mentality puts you on another level of strength. It's as if, before even opening your mouth, your attitude had already defined the course of the conversation. And it's in this invisible layer that great revelations happen, because you begin to realize that controlling the dialogue is, at its core, controlling yourself. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, but before that, comment, my mind wins before my voice. The three-step exercise to win discussions without effort. After understanding the silent strength behind Japanese philosophy and realizing how Miyamoto Musashi conquered presence before conquering any argument, comes the moment to bring this mentality into your real life. And the truth is that despite seeming something grand, inner mastery begins with small gestures, almost invisible, but carrying enormous impact. It all comes down to 3 simple steps that anyone can apply immediately and that work like a kind of emotional restart in the middle of conflict. The first is to breathe before responding. 3 seconds of silence might seem like little, but it's enough to break the impulse, dissolve reactivity, and put you back in command. It's in this microspace that transformation begins, because you stop acting from the heat of the moment and start acting from clarity. The second step is to name your internal state. It might seem strange, but when you identify what you're feeling, tension, anger, rush, something shifts inside you. Naming the feeling takes away its power, almost as if you turned on the light in a dark room. Suddenly, what dominated you becomes observed, and everything that's observed loses some of its strength. This is one of the secrets Musashi applied without fanfare, observing himself before acting. And this leads us to the third step. Speak only what's necessary. A well-placed question, a short sentence, a calm voice. When you don't get lost in long explanations, when you don't desperately try to justify yourself, when you don't react in a rush, your presence becomes more solid. Calm frightens, security dominates. And it's at this point that the discussion stops being a battle of arguments and becomes a space where your internal stability guides the course of everything. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. But before that, comment. I breathe, I name, and I dominate. Become the type of person who doesn't need to win. When you start applying these principles and realize how small internal choices completely alter the course of a conversation, something interesting happens. Your identity begins to change. Japanese philosophy has always emphasized that true transformation isn't in what you do once in a while, but in the type of person you become. And following this path, you stop seeking victory through force and begin conquering respect through presence. It's a silent change, almost imperceptible at first, but one that redefines your decisions, the impact of your words, and the way others perceive your energy. Miyamoto Musashi wasn't admired just for what he said, but for how he existed in the environment. He carried a clarity that didn't need to be explained, a posture that didn't shout, an inner strength that didn't depend on confrontation. And that's exactly the identity that begins to emerge within you when you learn to master your own state. You're not just learning a psychological trick to win discussions. You're becoming someone who lives with firmness, awareness, and stability. Someone who understands that when the mind is balanced, everything around it organizes itself. Someone who doesn't need to prove anything, because their very presence already transmits security. This is the journey that separates those who react from nothing and those who lead with maturity. And with time, you realize that true victory isn't in defeating the other, but in not losing yourself in the process. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, but before that, comment, I am presence, not reaction. The final truth about strength and presence. When you look at all this honestly, you realize that winning discussions was never about crushing the other, or about having the brightest answer or the firmest voice. In Japanese philosophy, especially in Miyamoto Musashi's teachings, there's a discrete revelation, almost hidden between the lines. The true battle happens within the mind before it happens in the external world, and this completely changes how you see each confrontation, because at its core the discussion isn't a duel between ideas, it's a duel between internal states. Whoever is in chaos loses clarity, whoever is centered gains direction, whoever tries to prove something wears themselves out, whoever remains present dominates the entire environment without needing to tense it. This realization brings a profound impact, because it shows you that the strength that really matters isn't the strength of speech, but the strength of consciousness. It's the ability to perceive your emotions before they decide for you. It's the maturity to not let yourself be dragged by impulse, even when the situation invites you to conflict. It's the wisdom to remain on your own axis when everything around wants to push you off it. And that's the essence of the mentality Musashi carried. The external enemy only has power when the internal enemy is unprotected. Therefore, controlling your own mind has always been the most legitimate form of power, and it still is today. When you accept this as truth, something inside you begins to reorganize. It no longer matters as much who's right or who's wrong. What matters is who's conscious. It no longer matters to win through speech. What matters is to win through inner control. The journey becomes less about arguments and more about presence. And with time, you realize that true authority is born in the silence before the answer. It's in that silence that you decide who will command, you or your reactivity. And that decision changes everything, your posture, your energy, your results. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, but before that, comment, my mind is my true weapon. Before I finish, if you've made it this far, that already says a lot about the type of person you're becoming. Someone who values presence, inner strength, and awareness. So, let me make you a very simple invitation, almost like a natural continuation of this conversation. If this content brought you clarity, if it helped you see discussions differently, if it sparked something inside you, consider subscribing to the channel. Here we keep exploring this path of a strong mind, Japanese philosophy, and the teachings of Miyamoto Musashi. Always with depth, always with truth. And since you followed everything to the end, leave me a comment just to let me know you're walking this path with me. Write, "My presence wins first." This phrase wraps up perfectly everything we've discussed here and marks this internal commitment you've just strengthened. If you feel this exchange made sense, also leave your like. It helps keep this conversation alive and build a community of people who, like you, seek this quiet transformation that changes everything from within. And if you want to keep deepening this journey, there's a video right here that complements exactly what we talked about today. Click on it and continue with me there. Your evolution doesn't need to stop here.